But I want to say this, you, whether you're a wife or a husband or just in a committed relationship, you are in no way the cause of their choices.
Doug Weiss and Joni Lamb's affair isn't just a scandal, it's a betrayal of the very ideals they've long professed to uphold. For years, Doug Weiss built a platform around sexual integrity, marriage restoration, and Christian counseling. He was seen as a spiritual authority, someone to whom broken couples could turn for healing and guidance. But beneath the polished veneer of television appearances and best-selling books was a man living a double life. Lisa Weiss, Doug's wife of over 25 years, stood by his side through the highs and lows of ministry. Together, they founded Heart to Heart Counseling Center in Colorado Springs, a place that attracted couples from around the world. Doug's narrative always included stories of his own journey out of sexual addiction and his marriage as a testimony of God's healing. But as Lisa would later reveal, the reality was far more complicated.
The woman who makes his bad choices 100% about him, his brokenness, his immaturity, his addiction.
In early 2023, rumors began circulating that Doug was spending more and more time in Texas, specifically at the Daystar television network, where Joni Lamb, the widow of Marcus Lamb, was continuing her late husband's legacy. Daystar, known for its prosperity gospel programming and Christian celebrity culture, welcomed Doug onto its stages and into its inner circle. But what started as ministry quickly evolved into something else entirely. Lisa Weiss's world began to unravel when she discovered the extent of Doug's emotional and eventually physical affair with Joni Lamb. This wasn't just a one-time indiscretion, it was a full-blown relationship that had been nurtured in secret while Doug maintained his public persona as a marriage counselor and Christian leader. Lisa was devastated not just by the betrayal, but by the hypocrisy. Doug and Joni's relationship was strategically revealed to the public only after Lisa filed for divorce. What was framed as a new beginning for Doug was, in truth, the result of months of deception. And for Lisa, the heartbreak wasn't just personal, it was professional. She had poured her life into a ministry that was now entangled in scandal, her reputation collateral damage in her husband's affair. Daystar didn't shy away from promoting the new couple. Doug appeared on air with Joni speaking about love, purpose, and God's will, as if his actions hadn't left a trail of devastation. It was a master class in rebranding using faith-based language to justify a relationship born out of infidelity. But the Christian community wasn't unanimously buying it. For many, this scandal highlighted a recurring pattern in evangelical culture. Charismatic leaders who live by one standard publicly while indulging in another privately. Doug Weiss wasn't the first, and unfortunately, he won't be the last. But what makes this story particularly painful is the depth of the deception and the spiritual manipulation used to cover it up. Lisa Weiss eventually broke her silence. In a powerful and emotional video, she shared her side of the story, not to attack, but to bring clarity and truth to a narrative that had been hijacked. She spoke of years of emotional neglect, manipulation, and gaslighting, of how she was made to feel like the problem whenever she voiced concerns, of how Doug used his platform to create an image he didn't live up to at home. Her courage in speaking out gave voice to countless women who have felt silenced in their marriages, especially within religious contexts. Lisa didn't just expose Doug's infidelity, she exposed the deeper issue of in-check power and the lack of accountability within Christian ministries. Her story became a beacon for those who had suffered in silence, encouraging others to confront the truth, no matter how painful. Meanwhile, questions swirled around Daystar and Joni Lamb. What did she know and when? Was she aware that Doug was still married when their relationship began? And how did a network built on biblical values justify elevating a man in the midst of such moral failure? Behind the scenes, employees at Heart to Heart Counseling Center were left to pick up the pieces. Clients were confused. Counselors felt betrayed. The very foundation of the ministry was shaken, not just by Doug's actions, but by the way they were spun to the public. Donations dropped. Trust eroded. and those who had once defended Doug were now forced to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the truth that had come to light. In the midst of this chaos, Lisa's transformation stood out. She didn't retreat into bitterness. Instead, she leaned into her faith, her community, and her calling. She launched her own counseling initiative focused on helping women recover from betrayal trauma. Her message was simple but powerful. You can survive even the deepest betrayal and come out stronger on the other side. As Lisa began rebuilding her life, she leaned heavily into the very principles she once taught alongside Doug. But this time she applied them to her own healing, therapy, self-reflection, support from close friends, and a renewed focus on her personal faith became her pillars. She stopped asking why Doug had done what he did and started asking what she needed to move forward. That shift marked a turning point. Lisa no longer saw herself as the victim of someone else's narrative, but rather the author of her own. She started speaking out. Not out of revenge, but out of a deep desire to help others who found themselves in similar situations. She wanted to use her voice not just to tell her story, but to encourage others to trust their instincts, to pay attention to red flags, and to remember that betrayal says more about the betrayer than the betrayed. Her bravery gave others permission to speak up too. Quietly and sometimes publicly, individuals reached out to her, people who had once admired Doug and felt confused by what they were now hearing. Some were patients, others were colleagues. A few had been close to both Doug and Lisa and were grappling with their own feelings of betrayal. Lisa listened, offering compassion but never bitterness. Her mission had shifted from helping couples as a unit to helping individuals, especially women, heal, set boundaries, and rediscover their worth. Meanwhile, Doug's world was changing too. While he and Joni Lamb publicly continued their ministry efforts, the weight of public scrutiny grew heavier. Critics and supporters of Daystar began asking hard questions. Was there an abuse of ministry funds? Were donors misled? And perhaps most unsettling, how could a man whose entire brand was built on integrity, fidelity, and spiritual leadership be involved in such a mess? Daystar, once seen as a beacon of Christian television, was now entangled in controversy.
Well, after scandal, heartbreak, grief, and public humiliation, Joni Lamb of Daystar Network opens up about the secrets and the storms that shook her world.
It was reported that Daystar's ministry jet was often used for personal trips between Fort Worth, Colorado Springs, and Destin, Florida, matching the time of Doug Weiss's relationship with Joni Lamb. These flights, estimated to cost $769,220.
We got back from our honeymoon. It was in July. And by the way, there are questions about, it's all over the internet, that Daystar paid $100,000 for my
Yes, I was getting ready to ask you about that.
So, absolutely not. Not one penny of Daystar's money was used for our honeymoon. We paid for our honeymoon, okay? So, again, that's another lie that's out there.
Some longtime viewers expressed disappointment while others remained loyal, believing that everyone deserves grace and a second chance. Joni Lamb herself was not immune to criticism. Some saw her as complicit, others as a woman who may have genuinely believed in the narrative Doug presented to her. The ripple effects extended beyond just one marriage or one television network. Conversations began to surface across Christian communities and counseling circles. People questioned the lack of accountability in leadership roles, the dangers of elevating individuals to celebrity status within ministry, and how unchecked power can lead even the most influential leaders astray. This scandal wasn't just about Doug and Lisa or Doug and Joni. It became a case study on the dangers of duality, how easy it is to perform one life publicly while living another privately. The consequences of this duplicity weren't just relational, they were spiritual, emotional, and communal. Lisa's story touched something deep in many people. Her vulnerability exposed how common it is for people, especially women in faith-based marriages, to suppress their intuition in the name of unity, to excuse emotional neglect as busyness, to mistake manipulation for leadership. She challenged the notion that staying silent in the face of dysfunction was the godly thing to do. Instead, she championed truth-telling, healing, and healthy boundaries, even when it came at great personal cost. For Doug, the fallout was more complex. While he still had a platform and supporters, the cracks in his carefully constructed image were undeniable. The counseling community he once led now had to reconcile with the revelation that their leader had failed to apply his own teachings at home. Trust was broken, not just in his marriage, but in his professional credibility. And once trust is broken, rebuilding it requires more than just public apologies and carefully worded interviews. It demands transparency, humility, and time, something many felt Doug had yet to fully embrace. In private Christian circles, this story became a whisper, then a headline, and eventually a cautionary tale. It forced churches, ministries, and counseling centers to reevaluate their systems of accountability. Were their leaders being held to the standards they preached? Were spouses given room to speak truth without fear of silencing or retaliation? And perhaps most critically, were donations being stewarded ethically and transparently? For some, these revelations triggered personal reflections. How many had dismissed their gut instincts about a partner, a pastor, or a mentor? How many had been taught that submission and silence were virtues, even in the face of deception? Lisa's journey served as a reminder that courage doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like walking away. Sometimes it's choosing truth over image, healing over reputation. Her resilience became an anthem for anyone who's ever been gaslit into believing that their pain was overreaction, that their concerns were unfounded, or that their sacrifices were for the greater good. As for Doug and Joni, the public continues to watch. Their story is still unfolding, and with each passing month, new layers are being peeled back. Whether they choose to engage these revelations with honesty or continue the polished narrative remains to be seen. But for those who followed this saga, one thing is clear: when spiritual leaders fail to align their public teachings with their private choices, the damage runs deep. It fractures not just families, but faith. And rebuilding that faith, whether in institutions, in relationships, or in oneself, takes more than words. It takes radical honesty, accountability, and a willingness to own the truth, no matter how inconvenient. So what can we learn from all of this? First, that discernment is not cynicism. Trusting someone's public persona without questioning their private behavior is not faith, it's denial. Second, that silence doesn't equal peace. Avoiding hard conversations doesn't protect a marriage or a ministry, it erodes it. And third, that healing is possible, but only through truth. As Lisa continues to reclaim her voice, her story reminds us that even in the aftermath of betrayal, there is beauty. There is strength in choosing truth. There is dignity in walking away from what no longer serves your well-being. And there is hope that even after a life of loving someone who couldn't be honest, you can still write a new chapter, one filled with peace, authenticity, and real love.